In the summer of 2016, fans are at each other's throats for Batman vs Superman. Civil War has been released to rave reviews, and Ben Affleck is gearing up to direct his solo Batman film. That will never be. Screen test footage is released by Ben Affleck showing Joe Manganiello as Slade Wilson, also known as the supervillain Deathstroke. The 10-second long footage simply shows the costume in motion, but fans got hyped for the Ben Affleck directed Batman film, which would see the Caped Crusader presumably face off for the first time against Deathstroke, the world's most dangerous assassin. Everything looked all set for Affleck's Batman film and Joe Manganiello's portrayal of Deathstroke. Also, I will almost definitely call Deathstroke Deadshot in this video, and I won't edit it out, because you know I'm lazy and that takes some time. So with everything set for Deathstroke to make his triumphant appearance in the DCEU, what happened? The character appeared in the Justice League post-credits scene along with Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor, hinting at the possible formation of the Legion of Doom. However, Eisenberg's Luthor and Manganiello's Deathstroke seemed like an old relic from a previous time, comparable to say all the characters in The Incredible Hulk, which will never appear in the MCU again. Okay, side note, before you all tell me, yes I know General Ross appeared, but no one else has reappeared as these characters are basically forgotten ideas. Deathstroke was even rumoured to be getting his own solo film, with Gareth Evans of the Raid fame writing and directing. Everything looked to be going swimmingly, until, well, here we are 4 years later from Affleck's original test footage, and we've seen Manganiello's Deathstroke show up for a total of 20 seconds on screen, and seen him utter one line of dialogue.
You better not be wasting my time.
So what happened to this iconic character? Well, let's dive into the history of Deathstroke in the DCEU, albeit the brief history he has. But before I get into all that, please do make sure you subscribe to the channel, and as always please like the video if you are enjoying my content. So let's cast our minds back to 2016. Batman vs Superman has been released to, well, less than enthusiastic reception, but Ben Affleck is moving forward with his solo Batman film. Rumours are spreading that Joe Manganiello will play the world's deadliest assassin Deathstroke, which is confirmed in the summer of 2016 with the release of test footage. Things are moving along steadily despite Ben Affleck dropping out of directing and writing the Batman. He is still set to star, with Deathstroke still the primary antagonist. In 2017, Gareth Evans is attached to direct and write a spin-off Deathstroke film, which I think was, we can all agree, a massive shame this film will never come to fruition. Evans recently spoke to Yahoo Movies where he confirmed the project is basically dead now, but also shed some light what his Deathstroke film would have looked like, saying he was influenced by South Korean noir films and he would have tried to implement that style into Deathstroke. The direct quote being, "I was like, these films are amazing. The texture and the tones of the colours, the grit and the aggression of them is super interesting to use to tell Deathstroke's story." Deathstroke is a brutal character, and making a noir-centred film around him would have definitely suited the character. I mean, could you imagine Deathstroke fight scene inspired by the old boy hallway scene? It would work fantastically well. Where Warner Bros went wrong with Deathstroke and any other films which looked dead and buried, such as Cyborg and Green Lantern, was jumping the gun too early in getting these films in development, before their cinematic universe was fully fleshed out. At the time of Manganiello's casting, only 2 films in the DCU had been released, and DC were announcing everyone was getting solo films, as if it was an obligation instead of releasing half a dozen films and seeing what shape their franchise was taking. Put it this way, it's like the MCU saying Loki is getting a spin-off film in 2010 before 4 is released, or Red Skull is getting a spin-off film. When you don't know if these more niche characters are a success and resonate with audiences, why say they are getting a spin-off film when you've yet to establish the major characters in your franchise? It's a case of walking before you can crawl, and the DC and the DCEU of course stumbled. So why didn't a Gareth Evans directed Deathstroke ever get off the ground? I think a lot of this can be traced back to 2017's Justice League, which essentially was the end of the Snyder era. After Snyder's first 2 films were so poorly received, Warner Bros took Justice League in a completely different direction, with many future ideas of the universe being put on hold, mainly being Affleck's Batman film. Since Justice League, only one character in that film has actually shown up in another DCEU film, being Aquaman, with of course Wonder Woman's sequel being on its way. It shows Warner Bros are very much keeping these characters at an arm's length, and the idea of a shared universe, showing that basically all their old ideas are going into the trash. Warner Bros. Wish to distance themselves from the Snyder trilogy and move the DCEU in a different direction. I think it's comparable to that of the MCU's handling of the Incredible Hulk. Characters such as the Leader, Betty Ross and Abomination have never shown up again in the MCU, with Marvel Studios always treating this film as basically not being canon, never referencing it and never picking up on old story threads from this film. Marvel essentially treat this film as non-canon in the MCU, and I think that's what Warner Brothers are doing with Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman and, well, Justice League. The feeling over at Warner Brothers is most of these early ideas basically didn't work, and future work needs to be away from this initial universe they set up. If a Deathstroke film was to be released, too many audiences would link it back to the early days of the DCEU, and Warner Brothers just want a fresh slate, which is understandable. Manganiello's Deathstroke was a product of when Affleck was directing the Batman solo film, and Snyder was to complete a Justice League trilogy. I'm sure there was a whole idea built around Slade Wilson in DCEU, which would have interconnected him within the Justice League's characters. But now, Warner Brothers are not interested in continuing these storylines. There doesn't seem much point telling the Deathstroke story when his initial story outline was that of the interconnected DCEU and telling of a larger story. The DCEU in its early days made the fatal error of trying to plan out the entire first 10 years of the universe and story, which is a terrible way to plan your franchise. Instead of making a few self-contained films and see which ideas work and see which don't, forcing Deathstroke into the mix before fully forming your characters was a massive mistake. And now Warner Brothers look a bit silly casting and hyping up a character who will presumably be left behind and never returned to again. Of course, a massive part of Manganiello's Deathstroke not being part of the DCEU anymore is the fact Affleck's Batman story will no longer be told, which had Deathstroke playing a prominent role in the film. Now Warner Bros. Are going in a completely different direction. The story outline that was put in place for Deathstroke has been completely dropped. I do hope we can see Deathstroke, as he is a pretty cool character and a fantastic Batman villain. Manganiello doesn't speak much about his short time as the character, but it's basically hinted it is unlikely the character will return to the DCEU, as the ideas surrounding the character were by people who are no longer associated with the DCEU. And the only way Warner Bros. Could hire a new creative team was throwing out all the old ideas and starting afresh. I mean, Deathstroke could have shown up in the Suicide Squad, couldn't he? But this just further shows that Warner Bros. Are now telling more self-contained stories and not focusing on the wider DCEU, which could have included Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke. I guess it will just be one of those castings that could have been. I really wish we got to see Deathstroke, and maybe we will in future films, but Joe Manganiello will not play the character. That I can guarantee. Anyways, thank you for watching.